Hey guys, so today we're actually going to start reading our new book, The Giver. So what I want you to do is open up your notebook to the first blank page and go ahead and write August 5th, 2014 in the top right hand corner. The very first thing that I want us to do is write our objectives for today. Our first objective is I can identify central idea in chapter 1 of The Giver. And our second objective is I can explain the setting and characterize Jonas. Jonas is our main character. As you can see, these objectives are a review for us. We have done this for the past 2 weeks, so this shouldn't be too challenging for us today. But today we're going to apply it to our new text. So by the end of the chapter, you should be able to identify a central idea, a summary of what happened. The setting of our novel is in a dystopia, and you have a dystopia and a utopia. A utopia is an absolutely perfect society where every single person is exactly equal. A dystopia is a society that tries to be perfect, but they try so hard that there are actually a lot of different problems. The main issue is that the society is very tightly controlled in order to eliminate inequalities. There are so many rules to follow, and every single person is supposed to be exactly the same, to the point where they never have the opportunity to think for themselves. So for the first unit, we're going to be reading The Giver, which is about a boy named Jonas who lives in a dystopian society. As we read this first chapter, we're going to be taking some notes about how the dystopian society is represented in the novel, as well as how Jonas is described in the novel. You're going to have a worksheet in front of you with some quotes on them, and you're going to tell us whether it describes the setting, the dystopian setting, or whether the quote describes Jonas. And then you're going to go ahead and write a quick little sentence in your own words, about what this quote tells us. So go ahead and open your book to page 1 and put your finger on It Was Almost December. As I read aloud, you need to be following along in your own book. It was almost December, and Jonas was beginning to be frightened. No, wrong word, Jonas thought. Frightened meant that deep, sickening feeling of something terrible about to happen. Frightened was the way he felt a year ago when an unidentified aircraft had overflown the community twice. He had seen it both times. Squinting toward the sky, he had seen the sleek jet, almost a blur at its high speed, go past, and a second later heard the blast of sound that followed. Then one more time, a moment later, from the opposite direction, the same plane. At first he had only been fascinated. He had never seen aircraft so close, for it was against the rules for pilots to fly over the community. Occasionally, when supplies were delivered by cargo planes to the landing field across the river, the children rode their bicycles to the riverbank and watched, intrigued, the unloading and then the takeoff directed to the west, always away from the community. So let's pause there and look at the first sentence of that paragraph. He had never seen an aircraft so close, for it was against the rules for pilots to fly over the community. Now this seems very strange to me because I see airplanes all the time. So this is one sentence, one quote, that shows us that Jonas's community is very different than ours. He had never seen an aircraft fly over him before. But the aircraft a year ago had been different. It was not a squat, fat-bellied cargo plane, but a needle-nosed single-pilot jet. Jonas, looking around anxiously, had seen others, adults as well as children, stop what they were doing and wait, confused for an explanation of the frightening event. Then all of the citizens had been ordered to go into the nearest building and stay there. Immediately, the rasping voice of the speakers had said, "Leave your speakers where they are." Instantly, Jonas had dropped his bike on its side on the path behind his family's dwelling. So let's look at this sentence right here. Instantly, obediently, Jonas had dropped his bike on its side on the path behind his family's dwelling. So I know, first of all, that Jonas is very obedient. He follows the rules as soon as it happens. So this shows us a description about Jonas. But also I find it very strange that they said his family's dwelling. Now, based on my context clues, I can figure out that this means his family's house. But the fact that he calls it a dwelling and not a house is very strange to me. So a house or home is a very familiar object to us. It is a very personal place. But here we call it a dwelling, which is very unpersonal. So here we see that this is another difference between Jonas's community and our community. He calls it a dwelling, which is just, the actual building. He doesn't call it a home, which is a word that would incorporate, families and memories and things like that. So we know that this is a very impersonal community. Let's keep reading. He had run indoors and stayed there alone. His parents were both at work, and his little sister Lily was at the child care center where she spent her after-school hours. Looking through the front window, he had seen no people. None of the busy afternoon crew of the street cleaners, landscape workers, and food delivery people who usually populated the community at that time of day. He saw only the abandoned bikes here and there on their sides. An upturned wheel on one was still revolving slowly. He had been frightened then. The sense of his own community silent, waiting, had made his stomach churn. He had trembled. But it had been nothing. Within minutes the speaker had crackled again, and the voice, reassuring now and less urgent, had explained that a pilot in training had misread his navigational instructions and made a wrong turn. So let's stop there for a second. Within minutes the speakers had crackled again, and the voice, reassuring, had explained, and then we're going to go ... So what we're seeing here is that there's a speaker system in this community that everyone can hear, no matter where you are, whether you're in your house or on the street. And someone comes over the speaker and gives messages. And we know that that's very different than our community too. We don't have a speaker system like that that you can hear no matter where you are. Let's keep reading. Needless to say, he will be released, the voice had said, followed by silence. Now, I'm not sure what release means, but we're going to keep reading and try to find out. There was an ironic tone to that final message, as if the speaker found it amusing. And Jonas had smiled a little, although he knew what a grim statement it had been. So I know because we use the word grim here, that to be released is not a good thing. I'm still not sure what it means, though. For a contributed citizen to be released from the community was a final decision, a terrible punishment, an overwhelming statement of failure. Even the children were scolded if they used the term lightly at play, jeering at a teammate who missed a catch or stumbled in a race. Jonas had done it once, had shouted at his best friend, "That's it, Asher, you're released," when Asher's clumsy error had lost a match for his team. He had been taken aside for a brief and serious talk by the coach, had hung his head with guilt and embarrassment, and apologized to Asher after the game. So we know that to be released is very bad, and we're going to assume, because we know the word release means to send away, that a person being released means they're being sent out of the community. Now, we're still not sure exactly what that would look like, but we'll find out as we keep reading this book. Let's read our last chapter here. Now, thinking about the feeling of fear as he pedaled home along the river path, he remembered that moment of palpable, touchable, stomach-sinking terror when the aircraft had streaked above. It was not what he was feeling now with December approaching. He searched for the right word to describe his own feeling. Jonas was careful about language. Not like his friend Asher, who talked too fast and mixed things up, scrambling words and phrases until they were barely recognizable and often very funny. So we know that Jonas was careful about his language, and we also know from before that he's obedient. So I'm going to say that Jonas is a very careful, well-behaved child and a very thoughtful child. So he always thinks about what he says, thinks about what he's going to say before he says it. So I'm going to write that Jonas is a thoughtful, well-behaved child. After you write that down, we're going to stop here, and you're going to turn to your shoulder partner for guided practice. You're going to finish filling out this chart, You're going to finish reading this chapter and fill out the chart as you go, stating whether each quote refers to a setting or to the characterization of Jonas, and then write a sentence telling me what it means. And that's it.